Although the tides may be turning and some companies may be enjoying lower turnover rates, some employees and leaders are still leaving companies at a rapid rate, taking the opportunity to progress their careers and find more flexibility with the new company. So, is it possible to lower your company's turnover rate by maybe 20, 30, or even 40%? And if so, what is the key? It is possible, and that's why we've asked Jason Lindstrom, CEO at Bucketlist Rewards, who's on a mission to help companies build the best cultures in the world, to join us today. Jason, welcome to Voices of HR.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation as well.
Well, we're super excited about this conversation as well. So, culture. So let's talk about culture for a minute. I think we both agree it's this incredibly powerful force within our organizations. It helps establish rules of engagement, whether you trust the organization or not, what gets prioritized, what doesn't, how we treat each other. And I think there's this broad acknowledgement from CEOs to entry level employees that culture matters. And your company is on a mission to create the best cultures in the world. So, if you will, for our audience, define what you mean by best culture.
Yeah, I think that is a great question and a really good place to start. I thought it might be fun to define, or at least start by defining what a good culture is not.
Mm,
So, for example, in my experience, it's not foosball tables in the office or when a company has free beer on Fridays. And those can be fun perks, by the way,
they
but
can.
that is not what good culture is. The best cultures, by my definition and in my experience, is one where the team is deeply aligned around meaningful purpose and vision.
Mm,
It's an organization where the values are alive, and the team is using those values on a daily basis to make key and important decisions. Um, I think culture is ultimately reflected in a high performing team, and it can be seen very obviously. For example, at Bucketlist Rewards, we've grown revenue by more than 3,000% in the past 3 years.
wow.
And we've also been recognized as one of the top 50 best places to work for in Canada. And it's interesting, those are kind of fun two bullet points at the very end, but those are lagging indicators. Those only show up, I believe, when you have a really great culture in place.
Mm, they do. And most companies today, though, go sideways with their cultures and with their values. And I always talk about the statistic 14% of companies actually live the values that are posted on their walls. So, where are some companies going sideways in creating this culture that they really desire? I mean, because a lot of companies do have it articulated, they have all those components that you just described articulated. They talk about it in their annual meetings. But what most employees will tell you is that most cultures described by their executives are aspirational at best, especially for women and people of color who sometimes live the opposite of that description in the workplace every day. So, why are companies going sideways in building the culture that they aspire?
Yeah, again, another really good question. And I think the way you prefaced and even asked this contains a bunch of hints on why companies might get it wrong. But again, in my experience, a lot of times companies might decide or define their values in an isolated boardroom. Maybe there's
Mm,
100 or maybe there's 1,000 employees in the team. They have offices all over the world. But a small group of like 3, 4, 5 people get together and they're like, our new values are going to be this. Our mission and
mm,
purpose is going to be this. And then, as you were saying, they might hang the mission on the walls or maybe tuck it away in an employee handbook. And maybe also the values are hanging on the wall, and that's the extent of the execution. Like when you think about culture, it's actually you're going to be augmenting and changing, hopefully in a very positive way, human behavior. That's what culture is.
mm,
And so to bring your culture alive and make it really healthy on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis requires a huge amount of work. So I'll share some stories and examples of how I've seen companies do this really, really well. And I'll also speak from the first person as well, some of the things we've done to build a healthy culture. So I'll kind of talk a little bit about the vision as a starting point. When it comes to vision, we took a lot of time and effort, and we're really deliberate about what our vision, mission, and values were. We followed a process called a painted picture process, where we set out what do we want the company to look like in 3 years' time,
Mm,
and we painted this really vivid vision as to how it would look and feel. We described what our values are. Some of our values are things like get it done, raise the bar, care for customers and team members, and achieve life goals. We defined that we wanted to have a multinational distributed team. We talked about our impact on the world, wanting to positively build the best cultures around the world and impacting millions of people. And then when this was written, we didn't put it into a field manual. Every time a new employee is applying for a job with Bucketlist, for example, before normally in the second interview, we send them a copy of our vision. We ask them to read it, and we ask them to come prepared with some questions to the third interview.
mm,
So even before they join the organization, they have a chance to get a sense of what we're trying to achieve, what our values are. And in the interview, we question them, like, from the vision, what really stood out to you, what's meaningful to you, and we use those questions to qualify people in or qualify people out. Uh, and then when they're part of the organization as well, on a quarterly basis, we give the team updates on what sort of items from our vision we're checking off. So it becomes a bit of a living playbook or a map to success, and it's super fun. Every time we're able to hit a big milestone, we can celebrate that as an entire organization and do some really great storytelling. When it comes to values, I think one of the best ways to bring values alive is through a peer-to-peer recognition program where employees can recognize one another for living the company values. There's all sorts of positive ROI associated with that. But when staff are actively recognizing one another for living the values, you're able to walk around as leader and ask somebody what the company values are, and they'll be able to quickly rattle those off. Um, and even on a weekly basis, we take time to celebrate some of the great achievements inside the organizations, and we're always tying those two values. And something else we do is we do storytelling. So for all of eternities, people have learned from one another by modeling and observing what the best behaviors are. And as a senior leader inside of an organization, when you recognize an employee, tell a story about an employee, a lot of the people in the audience watching that moment want a story told about them as well. So there's just a ton of things we do as a part of onboarding on a daily basis and even on a weekly basis to bring our mission, vision, and values alive. And I think when you start to do that, that's how you bring a culture and make it really exciting and fun to be a part of. That's when employees, when they go home for dinner at night, they can talk about what they did at work with a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment. So those are just a few of the things I've seen to how to successfully build a great and healthy culture.
Yeah, one of the things that you're describing is a conversation that I had with our guest last week, Vivian Kessler, who is a rock star executive recruiter who can go find these diamond in the rough executives and draw them into the right organization. And she talked a lot about culture. And the thing that we talked about most often that was most poignant in that conversation that you're living and breathing within your organization is that brand is really created from the inside out. So if you want to promise your customers or your clients a certain end result or a certain product, that it has to start internally because those are the people who are going to deliver it to your clients. And if there's a disconnect between what you say you aspire to be and who you actually are internally, you're going to see friction out there in the marketplace. And you're describing exactly that point.
Yeah, that's a really keen observation. And I think, in this day and age of social media, anytime an organization deviates from the truth, maybe they say something, maybe honesty and authenticity are their values, but something's happening at the senior level where that's not the case. Like
Mhm.
that gets surfaced so fast, and those stories get told and retold again and again. And there's no end of companies you can look at right now where employees are sharing internal secrets, internal documents, anytime there's misalignment between what's promised and what's being delivered. So I mean, 100%, you have to live that as an organization internally. And actually, also to your point, I think the the mission, vision, and values of an organization have to be deeply embodied and lived by the leaders.
Mhm.
So again, like one of our values is to care for customers. If there's ever an example of a senior leader who's not caring for customers, the team will be watching that behavior, and that whatever leaders do, wherever the leaders go, the team will tend to follow.
Mhm.
So the team will rapidly follow those behaviors as well. So like as a senior leadership team, as a CEO, I think I have to do my best on a daily basis to live our mission, vision, and values, and not deviate from that path. And as soon as I do that, I think it makes it okay for everybody else to do that as well. So, anyways, I'm just completely agreeing with your point. You're 100% correct.
Well, I'm glad there's agreement, although we do like disagreement as well, but I think when it comes to culture, it's best if you can align to both of our key points. So talk to me. So I would love to ask this question both as a CEO of a very successful company and also an organization that offers value to other organizations. As a CEO, there has to be times when maybe there was a misfire hire or there is someone who isn't really living your values. And what I found in my research was that most executive teams either don't know what's happening or they look the other way to the detriment of not only the culture, but the employees. And so, are there any tips or tools that you could give organizations when they have someone on their team who isn't living their values? Do you recommend handling it fairly quickly? Do you recommend training, mentoring? What do you need to do to keep everybody in sync with your culture?
So I think in the event there's a senior leader who's out of alignment with, the values, for example, ideally that's going to be picked up on a weekly basis. For example, something we do are weekly one-to-ones. We call them goal set and reviews, where we
Mhm,
talk about performance, KPIs, and there's open discussion. So it's a really safe forum for leaders to be talking to other leaders or employees to let them know whether things are going well or not well.
mm,
And then in annual or semi-annual reviews, I think it's important to actually evaluate people on both performance and whether they are living the values or not. Like there should be a formal check-in and even a rating from 1 to 5, let's say, on whether somebody's living a value. And then to your point, I think absolutely companies should be willing to hire and fire if people aren't living the values. Because again, like if you say something's important to your organization, and you don't, especially from a leadership level, and somebody's not adhering to that important value of the organization, you're going to see all sorts of deviant behavior beginning to emerge. And I'll just share a short story just about myself specifically. Like I really value kind of promptness and trying to be on time. My schedule tends to be really full. And I remember for a while, there's a period of time in the company where people would be showing up late for meetings, and I'd be like, why are people late? Like, what the heck's going on here? Like, and it wasn't horrible. It wasn't like 10, 15 minutes. It was like
right.
2, 3, 4 minutes. And I remember one time bringing this up in a one-to-one with a good friend and a colleague of mine, a fellow named Anthony. And he's like, Jason, you tend to be 2 to 3 minutes late for a lot of meetings. And he's like, maybe we should implement something like a fun push-up rule where for every minute you're late, you have to do 10 push-ups. And what Anthony had done is he'd called me out on what I was calling other people out on.
Right, right.
And I made a really conscientious note of that. And I put a Herculean effort into always showing up on time.
Mhm.
And I noticed as soon as I changed my behavior, everybody else started showing up crisply on time, especially when we started meetings crisply on time as well. So I think wherever the leader goes, the team will follow for the better or for the worse of the organization. And that's like a small example of how things can go wrong. But obviously, like if we again value truth and authenticity or customer care, and the truth isn't being told internally, or we're not truly taking care of customers, that'll destroy the culture of an organization. Because like I think as a leader, at the end of the day, like your word and what you value and how you hold yourself um, uh, can make or break an organization.
There were so many gold nuggets in that, not only living your culture and values, but as a leader, as the CEO, having your direct report give you feedback that's straight up, right? And allowed you to then make a change that positively impacted the rest of the organization. I mean, that's exactly what leadership is, right? But far too often, I think what we hear is that our leaders aren't willing to really be open to the feedback, let alone make a serious change. Even if it is what you described as somewhat small, it was something that was bothering you. So you're definitely living out your values. One thing I did want to go back to was the ROI. I love your idea around encouraging companies to for peers to recognize each other, because I think it's one thing for leaders, because leaders only have a very small glimpse into what employees do every day, but the peers are the ones sitting right next to them. They're the ones who are eating lunch with them. They're the ones who see everything that's going on. So tell us a little bit more about peer-to-peer recognition, best practices, and then you had mentioned too about ROI.
Yeah, so I'll kind of answer maybe in order that you asked around peer-to-peer recognition first.
There are a lot of questions packed in there, wasn't there?
Yeah. Um, so for the peer-to-peer recognition, a lot of times, like when it comes to recognition programs, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And probably the wrong way to do it is to do an ad hoc program where you just kind of ask managers to start recognizing staff, maybe because an organization had low scores in an annual employee engagement survey. And what I've observed is some managers are really good at it and some managers are really bad at it, and that can create inconsistency and also create problems inside of your organizations. And also, like, to your point, managers miss a lot of the great work that happens in a field. And like,
Mhm.
for example, maybe it's a hospital where you have, nurses and doctors out in the field interacting with patients, and like a project manager or program manager might have 10, 20, 30 people reporting up into them. They're going to miss so much of the great work, so much of the great patient care examples happening amongst the team. But when you empower staff to recognize one another for moments of of living a company's values, you're going to see way more recognition happening inside of an organization.
Mhm.
And then to connect it to ROI, there's lots of phenomenal things that happen when you roll out a recognition program, and specifically peer-to-peer programs. We work with one senior care organization called Home Instead, and they decided to roll out a recognition program. And when we rolled it out, we saw they rolled out things like a patient care awards,
Mhm.
peer-to-peer recognition around values, safety awards, the ability to do shift pickup awards, for example. And when they rolled out the program, staff could recognize one another. It was very, very cool. Managers could also recognize staff. And they saw in some of their care homes, turnover did go down by more than 40% because staff feel recognized and appreciated for all their contributions. So there can be a huge ROI to recognition, and with peer-to-peer recognition specifically. And there's also a really cool stat that when staff are recognized for living company values, you can increase employee engagement by 25%, which is just one more fantastic and positive outcome from recognition.
So when a company calls you and they have identified that they want to increase their recognition, there's something happening with engagement or whatever their tool is to measure success within their organization. They call you, you come in and assess, and then I would suspect there's some threads of recognition that work every time. Like I would suspect a peer recognition would work in most situations. But do you come in and strategically review with the organization what you think that they need and then talk through what the different programs would be?
Yeah, absolutely. And but what I think maybe for the benefit of the audience who might be listening today, I'll just share some good questions to ask and to think about. Um, So when it comes to like auditing and understanding how to roll out a successful program, it's really important to define some goals up front. Like, what is the purpose of the program? And some of the common goals I hear are things like to decrease turnover. Maybe you've rolled out some new values inside your organization and you want to bring those alive. So bringing values alive is a common goal. Another really common one is to break down silos. So any organization
Mm,
that has offices in different cities or geographies, or maybe they're in this day and age, there's a distributed team where lots of people are working from home or maybe coffee shops, breaking down silos and barriers. So you ask, what are the goals for the program? I guess really important to get clarity on your employee audience as well, and how would they interact with a program like this. And so one of the most successful ways to roll out a program, don't try to reinvent the wheel. Go to
sure.
the employees when it comes to their favorite communication tools. So for example, like maybe you're a tech company and you love instant messaging. Maybe that's Slack or maybe that's Teams. And 90% of your communication already exists on those channels. If that's the case, you should make sure your recognition program works in those tools. Maybe you're a little bit more traditional in emails, how everything's communicated. Maybe you have regular fireside chats where you bring everybody together either virtually or in person. And again, you can start any one of those meetings off with a 5-minute section just around good news where leaders can recognize staff and tell hero stories about the organization. So understanding the goals and objectives for the program, who are your employees and how they communicate, and weaving it into their favorite communication tools. And then even outlining what does success look like maybe 6 months from now. And then as a subset, you can define some of the pillars of the program. So peer-to-peer recognition is a really common tool. We see a lot of organizations using. It's also one of the most impactful ones.
Mm.
There's this whole concept of performance rewards, which are fascinating and cool, but like rewards and recognition is just a fancy way to say like it's a motivation platform, and we're able to motivate behaviors and outcomes. And with that in mind, you could roll out things like innovation rewards. You can roll out things like safety awards or patient care awards or customer care awards or sales rewards. And those will drive up behavior in those different areas when they're done correctly. And you can tailor those completely for an organization. For example, over at Google in the early days, they handed out something called a Founders Award, which was given out for innovation and business performance. And two products that emerged from the Founders Awards were Gmail and Google AdWords. And Google AdWords
Really?
has driven billions of dollars in revenue for the organization. So an
Wow.
innovation award can be a fantastic tool to drive innovative behavior. And we see that at play across the board for safety, and for a lot of other categories as well. So I think it's about understanding your organization, defining your goals, your target audience, defining what the end state is like, and then crafting a program to really help the organization achieve its goals and objectives.
That was fantastic, and I think every company needs recognition programs. You just described all the ROI that is really built into these types of programs, because people at the end of the day, they work because they have to live, but ultimately they want to be valued. And if they aren't being valued in the organization, I suspect that they're more susceptible to leave, increase turnover, and go find something that really is going to jazz them up, that feels like it's more of a life purpose. So if you will, take us upstream one step to, so we have a lot of our listeners are in HR. They're either the CHRO, the director of human resources. They may even be entry level in HR. And what are some tips and tools that you can give to them to help them identify that maybe a recognition program is needed within their organization? And what are some of the tips and tools that you could give them to actually present the information to the rest of maybe the C-suite or to the senior executive team that would compel them to want to engage and create maybe or augment their rewards and recognition program?
One of the times there's in product development, there's this metaphor of painkiller versus vitamin. And so a painkiller is like an Advil or aspirin, for example. When you have a headache, you'll take that. Vitamins you may or may not take on a daily or weekly basis. And products, a product can sometimes be a vitamin, it can sometimes be a painkiller. And there's certain times rewards and recognition is firmly a painkiller. And one of those is when an organization runs an employee engagement survey. Maybe it's a Gallup Q12 survey. Maybe it's using a tool like Culture App. Maybe it's SurveyMonkey. They all have employee engagement surveys built into them. And invariably, there's questions around recognition. So, am I being recognized at work? Do I have a best friend at work? Do I feel appreciated for my efforts? And most companies, from my experience, score quite low in that category. They might be doing great across the board and score really low on rewards and recognition. And also, in my experience, if you're going to take the time to survey your staff, you have to listen to that feedback. You have to implement it. Otherwise, people won't keep filling in these surveys. They're going to feel like their feedback is falling on deaf ears. So normally when a company runs these surveys, the leadership team is committed to fixing the problems that might emerge. And if recognition and rewards is one of them, it becomes a really easy business case to solve for. But if you wanted to, you can certainly take it one layer deeper, where you can acknowledge that it's a pain point. Sometimes actually meeting with some of the staff who don't feel recognized can be really powerful. In my experience, most senior leadership teams deeply care about their employees, and it's one thing to score like maybe low on a recognition score. Is an entirely different thing for somebody to say they've been working at a company and they never get recognized. For example, we worked with an organization out in Pennsylvania where they actually at a company kickoff. We often ask senior leaders to recognize staff, and at this particular event, the CEO was recognizing staff for hard work. And one of the girls there was recognized and she started crying. And afterwards, I had a chance to approach her and I asked, what happened? And she's like, I've been working here for 7 years. That was the first time I've ever been told thank you. And like, I guarantee you, if the CEO or C-suite staff knew about that, they'd want to fix that problem immediately. So sometimes those important, compelling stories aren't connected to the low scores, but you collect your scores, you maybe pull in a few quotes or testimonials like that from real staff members, and then you align the program around business outcomes. So most according to Harvard Business Review, for example, some of the most and biggest pain points are recruiting great staff, retaining customers, and driving sales. And recognition programs can help with all of those. Like if you want to recruit more and better staff, a really effective employee referral and rewards program can drive up employer referrals. If you want to retain staff, peer-to-peer recognition can help fix that. But in summary, you want to align the business objective, you want to align the rewards and recognition program objectives with the overall organizational objectives. And so I think in this manner, it becomes a bit of a no-brainer where you're solving a huge glaring issue in the organization and you're able to add value on the tail end that makes everybody happy.
So when you're let's just pull this thread. So senior executives have bought in. They say, absolutely, we want to do something. We love our people. We value them. We want them to feel recognized and valued because that's what we believe, and that is part of our culture. Do employees have different needs when it comes to recognition? And what are some insightful questions that maybe you can ask people about how they want to be rewarded? Because I may be someone who I don't really want the public recognition. I'd prefer just to have my boss know that I did it. It's just kind of awareness versus, standing up in front of a big group.
You're totally correct. When surveying staff, let's say you've decided to make the move to roll out a program, it's really important to understand how people want to be recognized. Some people love public recognition. Some people do not like it at all.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean they don't want
Right.
recognition. You should just make sure your program allows you to do private recognition through the tool. And for example, if somebody doesn't like public recognition, you probably don't want the CEO to do like a hero story in front of 100 or 1,000 staff. Probably going to have the opposite outcome. Another really fun thing to do is rewards become increasingly more important the more they're personalized towards the individual. So if you can ask people how they want to be rewarded, and you can provide like a bit of a menu, like here's 10, 20, 30 things, please rank them from 1 to 5 on whether you like this or not. And then for huge bonus
Mm.
points, you can often ask people, what's something on their bucket list, let's say, or what's something really meaningful to them. And the more personalized the reward, the better. And the true secret about this is it doesn't have to be big to be meaningful. It just has to be personalized. For example, our director
Mm.
of demand generation, Olga, she just happens to love glazed donuts, which I know it sounds silly, but like sending her to London, and so
Olga,
I
I'm
can
with
send
you.
her some glazed donuts from over in North America here and have them delivered in a nice time of day. That's going to put a huge smile on her face because A, she loves donuts, and B, she knows that she's appreciated enough that somebody took the time to remember that and reorder her in a way that matters to her. Another kind of cool example maybe on the bigger end, I know a guy named Anthony who always wanted to learn how to fly, and we ended up sending him to get some flight lessons. He didn't get a fully certification, but he got to go up in the air, got to take control of the airplane, take a bunch of pictures of that moment. And again, he felt deeply cared for and appreciated because you're helping that employee in a way that really matters to them. I'm sorry, one other quick example. Rewarding the individual is great.
Please.
Rewarding them and their significant others even better. we've sent. So for example, maybe somebody loves football, sending them to like a Seahawks game, assuming they're Seahawks fan, like maybe a father and son, mother and daughter, whatever it is, taking care of the whole family unit is like massively more impactful, because it's suddenly you're not just employing that person, but you're caring for the whole family in a deeply meaningful and personalized way.
That is such an excellent point. And great leaders intuitively know that, but I love that you have programs that encourage it within organizations because sometimes managers don't even think about it. So, have you ever seen this is kind of the executive and the leader in me standing out. Have you ever seen an organization who has taken the peer to peer recognition? They've really honed it, it's really working well, and then used it to identify maybe best leaders for succession planning.
I think inside the program, inside of a good program, it doesn't matter like with us or with others or even an internally built one, it's really important to monitor like, are people living the values? Are they recognizing their staff on a regular basis and colleagues and team members? I think it could be a good early leading indicator of a fantastic culture fit. Um, I think if you're going to promote somebody to leadership, there's culture fit is critical. Like you don't want somebody like my favorite example is like you can have a really high performing salesperson who's just like a jerk, um, and that's not a good culture fit. And in my experience, you just need to eject that employee from your organization. So, anyways, culture is a huge part of leadership,
Exactly.
but obviously, there's going to probably be some other criteria that you'll want to take into account. But certainly, yeah, it's a great indication of whether somebody's a culture fit, whether they're a team player, their ability to lift up and raise their colleagues. I think the best leaders do follow a form of some sort of form of servant leadership where they lift up those around them and make everything better around them, and they can't even help it. They're just doing it everywhere, whether it's at work or whether they're the coach of their daughter's soccer team, whatever it might be. They're just constantly lifting people up, and that shows up in peer-to-peer recognition, for example.
So use it as a component, possibly, of identifying future leaders.
Yeah,
Because what
absolutely.
I love, again, is because the peers are seeing them in action every day, and they actually get to see whether they're authentic leaders or not. Because again, a lot of succession planning programs are selected, the individuals selected by executives who maybe see them, 1 hour out of the quarter in a presentation in their best light, and they're like, "Oh, they're really good. We should really get them, on the leadership track." When actually they're not at all, and the peers can tell you that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yes. The team tends to know far faster, more often than senior leadership team may or may not know.
They do, they do. So have you had any situations so let's prepare our HR pros who are listening. Have you had any situations where the CHRO or director of HR has said, "Okay, looking at the engagement results, I absolutely see a trend here. I really think we need to engage with an external company, a consultant, with you." And the executive team has really pushed back and said, "We really can't afford this. We really can't." Are there any top, maybe one or two pushbacks that most CHROs get from the executive team that you could help them work through right now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Normally, it comes down to, in my experience, when it comes to like how decisions get made at the senior leadership team level, typically there's three burning priorities, and those things will move forward. And obviously, there can be more than three, but like you want to float whatever your program or idea is into the top three, or make sure it aligns with those top three. So internally, having clarity around what the organization wants or cares about is going to be really important, and then aligning the program to help achieve that. But on top of that, like everyone hates to lose an A player,
Mhm.
especially CEOs. Like,
Mhm.
my lord, the pain associated with losing somebody great. And one of the
So
number one
true.
reasons people quit is due to lack of recognition, especially at a senior level where they're probably compensated really well
Mhm.
and have an amazing career path ahead of them. There's a great stat from Gallup where they found that 75% of people quit their job to get away from a lack of recognition.
Mm.
So, anyways, I think I think losing an A player, one of the number one reasons to lose an A player is lack of recognition. Those are just a few of the quick stats that you can keep at your disposal. And if people are interested, and again, I'd highly recommend you implement a recognition program, whether it's with us or somebody else. But if you're interested, we have a really cool ROI calculator where you can punch in your employee headcount, you can punch in your goals and objectives, and it'll shoot you out a quick number showing you like how much you can lower turnover by, the decrease in absenteeism, the increase in employee engagement. It can give you all sorts of like hard numbers to show you how much money you can save or make by implementing a program like this. And you can find that on bucketlistrewards.com, or you can reach out to our team as well, just if that's of interest. And there's no cost associated with that.
Well, I think anytime that there's tools available to HR, because sometimes some of our listeners are one-person HR shops, right? That need to really hone their presentation and the reason why they want to move forward with this, and those types of tools will help them. So can you say that one more time where they can find that tool?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's at bucketlistrewards.com, and it's under our little resources section. There's a link to an ROI calculator that you can fill out. It's really fast and easy. It takes about 2 minutes to complete. So
That's incredible. Okay. All right. So are you ready? We're moving into the end of our podcast. And at the end, we always ask our guests if they would be willing to play rapid fire questions with us. They're one question or one sentence questions with one sentence responses.
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. What is the biggest problem you or your team has solved in the last year?
One of the coolest things we did is we implemented a mentorship program, bringing in some senior people from organizations that have achieved exactly what we want to achieve. And I think it's the biggest lever we've pulled to enable the company to achieve its growth goals and culture building goals. And sidebar, I know you said one sentence answers. Just ping me on LinkedIn. We created an ebook. We have nothing to do with mentorship. I just deeply believe in it. I'm happy to send you our ebook that we created internally. I highly encourage people to implement that. So.
Love it. What are who are some people or experts that you follow and why?
Great question. For those in the HR space, there's a fantastic blog from Google called Rework. And I just read a book called $1 Trillion Coach from Eric Schmidt, who's also the former CEO of Google. It's one of my favorite books I've read in the past 3 years.
What are underrated tools that are indispensable for your job?
I struggle with this one a little bit. The one I'm playing with a lot is Chat GPT. That's a pretty darn cool tool for all sorts of reasons. And another book for leaders, it's called Traction, or EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating Systems. And a lot of the ideas I've referenced today come from that book.
Why should CEOs give HR the recognition that they so deserve?
Because fundamentally, companies are driven by human beings. I 100% feel HR leaders should have a seat at the SLT. Like we're all in the people business, whether we say it or not. So,
very well said. Where can people go to learn more about you and your company?
Yeah, probably our corporate website is best, which is just bucketlistrewards.com. And if you want to connect with me directly, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I love meeting new people, and my name's just Jason Lindstrom. So feel free to find and connect with me there.
So today we have been joined by Jason Lindstrom, CEO of Bucketlist Rewards. Thanks again for joining me, Jason. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much for watching. We would love it if you shared your thoughts on any of the topics we discussed in the comments below. And if you got value from the video, it would mean the world to us if you hit the like button and subscribe to the HRMorning channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Voices of HR.